Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to a brand new legal breaking reporting video analysis update. Donald Trump has yet again illegally and unconstitutionally fired a US attorney from California, more specific, the Eastern District of California, for rightfully following a court order. Let's get into this brand new reporting by the New York Times. Ladies and gentlemen, the article is titled, "Trump Fired a U.S. Attorney Who Insisted on Following a Court Order." The top federal prosecutor in Sacramento was fired hours after she reminded a Border Patrol chief to abide by a court-ordered restrictions on immigration raids. Ladies and gentlemen, the article reads, "For 15 years, Michele Beckwith oversaw some of the toughest federal prosecutions in California. She went after transnational terrorists, sex offenders, and Aryan Brotherhood. She became the acting U.S. attorney in Sacramento this year after her boss, a Biden appointee, stepped down in January. But her career crumbled in July," she said, after she issued a warning to Gregory Bovino, the California face of President Trump's immigration crackdown. The dismissal of Ms. Beckwith appeared to be an early example of how Mr. Trump has fired top federal prosecutors who did not help carry out his political agenda. Last week, Mr. Trump fired a U.S. attorney in Virginia who determined there was insufficient evidence to indict James B. Comey, the former FBI director, and Letitia James, the New York State Attorney General, both political targets of Mr. Trump. Ladies and gentlemen, editorial edition. The Virginia prosecutor was replaced by a Trump loyalist who convinced a federal grand jury on Thursday to indict Mr. Comey on 2 counts. Documents reviewed by the New York Times show that the July 15 firing of Ms. Beckwith occurred less than 6 hours after she told Mr. Bovino, the Border Patrol chief in charge of the Southern California raids, that a court order prevented him from arresting people without cause in a vast expanse of the Oregon. She was removed not only from her post as acting U.S. Attorney in the Eastern District of California. But from the it's she said she said the firing, excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, firings across the federal government this year. In an interview, we have to insist the laws be followed. Ms. Beckwith, a Democrat, was replaced temporarily by Kimberly Sanchez, a Republican who worked in the Eastern District. Days later, Bovino and his agents went to Sacramento and raided a Home Depot parking lot where they said that they arrested at least 8 people for being in the country without authorization. Quote, "Folks, there is no such thing as a sanctuary city," Mr. Bovino said in a video he shared on social media. With a holstered gun at his hip and canisters secured to his vest as he stood in front of the state capitol. Quote, whether it's here in Sacramento or nationwide, he continued, we're here and we're not going anywhere. The end of Miss Beckwith's federal career was precipitated by a phone call from Mr. Bovino on July 14. He told her that he was bringing his officers to Sacramento, about 600 miles north of the Mexico border, and wanted to know whom to notify in her office if they were assaulted, she recalled. Miss Beckwith said she reminded him that the Border Patrol federal court order prohibiting it from stopping people, ladies and gentlemen. Indiscriminately in her district, it was clear, she said, that she knew about the order, but did not seem to think it would stop his raid. At 10:57 the next morning, she emailed Mr. Bovino to reiterate she expected compliance with court orders and the Constitution. Hours later, her work phone went dark. Then her computer did, too. She checked her personal email account. Miss At 4:31 p.m., she received an email from Sarabina Sharma, Saurabh, Special Assistant to Trump. Michelle, it stated, on behalf of President Donald J. Trump, I am writing to inform you that your position at ladies and gentlemen, as First Assistant United States Attorney and employment with the Department of Justice is terminated effectively immediately. Ms. Beckwith was promptly marched out of the office. A spokeswoman for Mr. Trump referred questions to the Department of Department of Justice. Which declined to comment on the matter. A Department of Homeland Security official who was part of the Sacramento operation and spoke on the condition of anonymity because they were not authorized to speak publicly said that federal officials were offended by Ms. Beckwith's suggestion. Ladies and gentlemen, that immigration agents were going to violate the rights of migrants. What's more, the official said Mr. Bovino felt Miss Beckwith was ladies and gentlemen, refusing to provide his team with the legal support it needed to safely conduct the operations. In his statement, Mr. Bovino said, quote, the former acting U.S. Attorney's email suggesting that the United States Border Patrol does not always abide by the Constitution revealed a bias against law enforcement. Quote, Ms. Beckwith, impasse with, ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Beckwith's impasse, IMPASSE, with Mr. Bovino was noted, ladies and gentlemen, rooted in a lawsuit filed by the American Civil Liberties Union after his border agent border agents, ladies and gentlemen, conducted the unannounced raids in Bakersfield where they arrested day laborers outside a Home Depot and farm workers' orchards in January. A federal judge in April ruled that the Border Patrol could detain people only if they had a reasonable suspicion that they were violating federal immigration law. You can't, quote, you can't walk up to people with bras, ladies and gentlemen, brown skin, and say, quote, give me your papers, unquote. U.S. District Court Judge Jennifer Thurston said she granted an injunction stopping the Border Patrol from detaining people without probable cause with the case proceeds. Ladies and gentlemen, while the case proceeds. But the order did not apply to Southern California, where federal officials intended ladies and gentlemen, intensified their crackdown in June, leading to protests and Mr. Trump's deployment of the National Guard against wishes of California's leaders. A Los Angeles judge in July also placed restrictions on immigration raids in California. But the Supreme Court ridiculously overruled my editorial's note, ladies and gentlemen. Her decision this month. Quote, the Supreme Court's decision is evidence of the fact Border Patrol follows the Constitution and the Fourth Amendment, unquote, Mr. Bovino said. Ladies and gentlemen, he is effectively lying. Of course he is. Just like that SOB in the Oval Office, illegally, might I add, currently. There are 93 U.S. attorneys overseeing federal prosecutions in districts throughout the country. It is common for them as appointees to resign after a new president is elected. It is not common, however, for presidents to demand that prosecutors carry out certain acts as a condition of employment. Nina Mendelsohn said, a professor of law at the University of Michigan with expertise in administration, ladies and gentlemen, administrative law, U.S. Attorney, attorneys, ladies and gentlemen, are supposed to be able to operate freely from political pressure. Quote, we still have a norm of prosecutorial independence and even-handedness and integrity at the federal level, unquote. She said, quote, political pressure to prosecute enemies or shield friends would not typically be considered cause for removal, unquote. In August, Attorney General Pam Bondi appointed Eric Sieber, who defended the Trump administration against the major environmental lawsuits during the president's first term as president. Ladies and gentlemen, interim U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of California, Mr. Grant, replaced Miss Sanchez, who is now second in command in the office, the position that Miss Beckwith once had. Miss Mendelazon said the firing of longtime civil servants without cause, as in the case of Miss Beckwith, is rare. Miss Beckwith said that while the president had the right to remove her as acting U.S. attorney, she should have allowed her. Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, he should have allowed her to return to prosecutorial work in the Eastern District. Miss Beckwith, ladies and gentlemen, Beckwith has appealed her termination, arguing she could not be fired without cause and without due process. She is seeking that her removal be expunged from her record, as well as back pay with interest and attorney's fees. Ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for this legal breaking reporting and video analysis update. If you did enjoy this legal breaking reporting video analysis update, please firstly like, comment, share, subscribe, and enjoy it. Secondly, if you would like to make sure you're always up to date, please hit the bell icon as well as the all notifications option. It's completely free of charge. It does not cost anything. No money, no paywall, no nothing. Next, if you guys would also like to stay up to date, please follow me on my social medias. That'll be in the video description below. Lastly, ladies and gentlemen, please help me reach and achieve the goal of 280 plus subscribers. Ladies and gentlemen, the reason why I'm saying 280 plus subscribers is because right after we reach and achieve the goal of 280 subscribers, we have more subscribers to reach and achieve right after we reach and achieve the goal of 280 subscribers. For now, ladies and gentlemen, please look out for my next legal breaking reporting video analysis update, and I look forward to talking to you guys in my next legal breaking reporting.